This is The Cross Section with Nate Lull and David Edelstein.
All right, it's about time to revive the cross section, and it's good to see you too.
Yeah, I know when things have picked back up for you, having some real games to go to, I've been jealous, but also you've been busy. I've been busy, so it's good to get this back going again.
Yeah, it's sometimes, I felt like I was a little bit more in a normal state of mind than a lot of people were, because we had this high school sports, and of course it was very different from the beginning. It actually felt weird from the beginning to just be there. And then you had the masks and everything and all the different regulations. And then mid-season, things were changing. Like by the hour, there was one situation where we weren't sure we'd go to games. And then it turned into this whole thing with the county and the state talking to each other. And the athletic directors that were like, no, you're not allowed to come anymore. By halftime, they were like, hey, you want to come right now? So it's, definitely been keeping me busy, but it's kind of interesting that, I can only imagine for you what you've been up to without a lot of stuff. I just think that if I was, living in an hour south of here, if that's where the television station was, and it was harder to get to Section 3, or Section 4 was playing and Section 3 wasn't, it would be just as quiet as it has been this whole time. So what have you been up to? Because for me, it somewhat felt normal, but what's been keeping you occupied?
Yeah, I think everybody down here, again, is a little jealous because we see all the work you're doing, the highlights, and mostly for the athletes and coaches, that they're out there playing some sort of a season, no matter what it is. And I think people are very wishful that we could be doing that down here. But I think athletes are making the most of it down here. A lot have continued to play travel ball into the fall as much as they can and been doing things for basketball and baseball. I mean, I've known a couple of kids who are still playing baseball up until this weekend. So for me, it's been a lot of the podcast. Appreciate everyone listening to that. We've had a couple of special episodes, but just catching up with coaches and athletes and athletic directors and getting their thoughts on what they're doing. I think that's given us a little sense of normalcy down here, to just talk to people, reminisce about times before this, and kind of talk about what the future could be once we get back to normal. And it's, as you know, it's been interesting to hear what different schools are doing, especially down here when we aren't allowed to have games. Some have gotten really creative with ways to keep kids active. So we're finding a way. We're getting through it. And I think the biggest thing down here, and I'm sure it's the same for you, is everyone's been really positive about it, and we're just hoping to turn the corner sometime soon.
I know that two things Rob Zayas, the executive director for New York State Public High School Athletic Association, had said are, one, he hopes this is the warmest winter in history in central New York, or in New York. So far, so good, honestly. It was cold a few days, and we did get a little snow up here. But, it was 80 degrees on Monday and 40 degrees today. So, I can't complain. But the other thing he had said is that, stay patient and, keep looking ahead. But what's your sense of how easy or how difficult it's been for the Section 4 area teams to remain positive and remain patient and keep looking ahead? Because at some point when you're looking ahead and you just keep seeing from spring being postponed, then canceled, then the summer youth, when can we start? And then fall, are we going to do it? Okay, no, in Section 4. And now I already know that at least 2 leagues in Section 4 have already further delayed winter sports from their already delayed time from November to December to January now. So what's your sense of how easy or difficult it is to remain positive like that and just keep looking ahead?
I've been impressed the most, I think, with the athletes and their attitude on it. I think I've found more frustration in administrators and teachers and adults that I talk to for my interviews, and that they want to get something going, and they're itching to get going again. I have found that the kids have just kind of gotten to a point where they're like, hey, I'm going to train when I can train, and I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to keep working out. I'm going to try to stay in shape, and whenever we get through this is fine, and I'll be hopefully ready. And I've been impressed with that positive attitude, that's for sure, because I can't imagine thinking back to my high school years, and even for some of these athletes that we both know that have gone on to college, and to continue to have those things taken away. I don't know how I would stay positive, but everyone seems to be doing a pretty good job, and that has been really impressive to me. On the other hand, I think it's been frustrating in Section 4 because we do see other sections being a little more progressive and willing maybe to try to do even some small things like Section 3 is doing, and just getting out there and playing some games. I am starting to hear a lot of chatter about we have to find a way to give our kids some sort of school activity to do, even if it's a small 5-10 game schedule, get people out there and get them active because they deserve that. So, but the safety part is a huge part of it too. So such a double-edged sword on that. That's tough. I'm interested to hear from your perspective, like how it's gone, because we haven't heard a whole lot of that down here. Like we see highlights, we see games, we see people running around, but like for someone who's on the ground there, how have you felt like the whole process has been?
I mean, yeah, I was explaining to a few athletic directors actually the other day about how the media market works. And I know we've already gone over that plenty of times on the cross section, but because there are plenty of schools, all of Otsego County is watching the television station. They're seeing what I'm putting on air of the Section 3 teams nearby. And I was thinking, I was like, man, they've got to be maybe jealous in a way, but I don't, just at least longing for the athletics a little bit more, seeing it actually happen. Like it's almost got to be like a surreal moment to be like, wow, okay, I play for a soccer team. I play for, maybe the Unitigo girls soccer team that went to states and everything. And then all of a sudden you're not playing because you're hearing all about how your season's not going to happen. But then meanwhile, you're watching TV every night, and there's Whitesboro and there's New Hartford and and don't get me wrong. So one of the big things is not every school played in Section 3 either. There were early on a lot of discussions about who's going to play, and a lot of funding and travel considerations and things like that. For example, a school like Old Forge had maybe not heated, but very philosophical debate and conversation at a Board of Ed meeting within the first week at the end of September of, do we play? And there was a lot of good points on each side of, okay, we want to give them the athletics, but can we do something internally, or what's it going to take to travel? Because Town of Webb, Old Forge, I mean, their closest trip is like 45 minutes. And they played Cooperstown sometimes. And obviously Cooperstown's another Section 3 school, happens to be in Otsego County, that did not play this year. But for them, Old Forge, I'm using as the example of kind of the collective result of all the parts that came together for a lot of other schools that they didn't play because of. So you've got travel, or you've got, didn't want the risk, or we're going to just try and do something ourselves internally, or we just actually didn't even have enough players. Actually, their teams didn't even, the students didn't want to participate. So you had to have all of that come together, and the funding and the coaches and the staffing to be able to play, including with this 20% state funding cut that's going on. So not everyone played here. And so along with Section 4 entirely, there was a lot of change here in Section 3. And we wound up with basically two different leagues: the Center State Conference, which then split this year into, instead of its usual 4 divisions, into an East and a West, because again, less teams. And they basically stayed within their divisions most of the time. And then we had the Section 3 Tri-Valley League. I'd say from the beginning, it was interesting to see who was playing and why. Then wearing the masks was the big change, right? Stay apart, wear masks. I would say realistically, I mean, you can watch my highlights that have been aired, so it's not like this is not blowing up a secret here, but the participants were not really wearing their masks all too often. They were kind of down or sometimes falling down, but often not being really worn, which is something I'll touch on if we talk about winter sports. But yeah, being on the ground, it was great to see the sense of normalcy. And when I asked in the beginning of the season to coaches and players, and athletic directors, what would be a successful season look like? They said making it through with everyone being healthy. I will say, as the final point of kind of how it's all gone, we've had stuff, but everything's still been changing on an hourly basis because of this virus. It's just so unknown. We did get through. It appears that all schools are healthy, but we averaged one school per week that shut down. First, it was Holland Patton. Then it was Utica Academy of Science. Then it was Westmoreland. Then it was Camden. Then it was New Hartford. Of the 5 weeks of the season, we had 5 schools shut down because of coronavirus cases in their district. And overall, it either ended their season or they played or they did their contact tracing. Every time I'd go to a game, I had to fill out the same form. They took my temperature at my head. It's always great having things pointed right at my forehead, you know. I signed my name so many times. I've never been asked for so many autographs in my life. But, you know, they were doing what they had to do and managing. And it appears that if the standard of success for the season was to manage the virus and make sure everyone stayed safe and know that this could still be your last game, which for some people it was, and they didn't expect it, I would say it was a successful season. I don't know if all the rules were followed exactly, but it appears everyone is safe, is healthy. They got through the season. And then in the Tri-Valley League, they gave them a little bit of a league tournament at the end to kind of give a meaningful end to the season, is what the coaches had said. So, but still, one last thing I'll just throw in there to give this perspective on what it was like. It wasn't like I could just trust the schedule either, which you should always check the schedule every day anyway. But I mean, I was going to some schools and every school had their own policy. Either they wanted you on a list beforehand, especially as media if you were showing up. 2 participants, right? 2 spectators per participant. But you also had these funny things where, you know, student body groups like the student section would show up and sit on top of cars on outside the fence, or people would line up and sit up on hills and things. Or one of the funny ones was just yesterday at New Hartford. They would all line up in their cars across the street, but you could see the field. And anytime a goal was scored at a soccer game, they'd honk their horns. And it was just, you know, people were finding their ways around those sort of things. But overall, a big respect for distancing and all of that. But I will say that, you know, there was a day where, you know, Vernon Verona-Sherrill High School decided that they, as a school district, were not going to allow any spectators at all. Then they were saying, you know, it appeared they misinterpreted the district, that there was a rule that said there couldn't be more than 50 spectators, and then the teams plus the officials made 50. Well, it turns out that blew up into a whole thing where it was like, you know, all these rules are hard to understand sometimes. So then they were like quoting the county, but the county, Oneida County Executive Anthony Vicente was like, no, we spoke to the state and we're going to get clarification, but it's fine. And so literally within a matter of hours, I was told people did not want to talk to me on the phone. These athletic directors who I usually have great connections with, they're like, I can't talk right now. I'm busy. And then, you know, they probably were, but they just didn't want to talk to me. They were just like, I was like, so can I come? I was trying to just understand. They're just like, did not want to talk. But then an hour later, after the county goes through their whole thing, it was like, no, like here's what it says. You could have 50 people on top of the teams, on top of media, on top of essential staff for the game. I literally got a call. Okay, actually, David, it's halftime. You want to come down for the game right now? I was like, I think I'm going to have to pass on today, unfortunately, because I can't get there fast enough. But it just shows things are still in flux, and I imagine that even though this was a successful season, as we go ahead into winter, that things will still be in flux in the same sort of way.
Yeah, I know both you and I have been trying to keep up with things on what the future will be here for the winter. Sounds like Section 3 and Section 4 are both in different places right now. But again, waiting more guidance from the state, and we'll see. It's going to be tough, I think, for those high-risk sports to have any chance at the moment. You know, what are your feelings on that?
Well, to clarify, something that was clarified for me just this past week, because again, all the wording is all over the place because we're all figuring it out and things reference each other, but then the references are like paradoxes, you know. The state health department has clarified with me at Eyewitness Sports that in order for high-risk sports to play, they have to be given authorization from the New York State Department of Health and the governor's office. So they need to explicitly say low and moderate risk sports such as rifle and skiing and bowling, as long as bowling alleys remain open, because now they've been told to close before 10 or at 10, right? Think the virus cases are over 100
Right.
per day here for the first time since the start of the pandemic. So we'll see how that goes. But low and moderate risk can go. But they clarified the high risk ones like basketball, ice hockey, and the spring sports like boys lacrosse still, right, need to be approved. So waiting on that. Previously, we thought that if they just didn't give any advice on it before the December 31st, that you could just start. So John Rathbun, Section 3 Executive Director, was saying, January 4th, we're going to start. They postponed Section 3's start of practices to December 14th. Open gyms have been allowed as long as you follow the rules, but those have been hard. And he said games could start as early as January 4th, or maybe we delay to January 11th. So there's a lot of, we're going to wait and see again. The phrase holding pattern has returned now that the fall sports season has ended. But I really wanted to know from you, because I think you might have a more interesting perspective at the moment on this, because Section 4, like we had said, the crystal ball last time, has really been focusing on winter sports the whole time we've been focusing on fall sports, because Section 4 was like, okay, next. So I know that the STAC and the IAC, do you pronounce that word either? Is that league, does that have a pronunciation? Or the IAC league? Anyway, the STAC and the IAC.
No, they just call it.
Okay.
Yep.
I didn't think they call it the EAC, but the STAC and the IAC have already postponed their sports to January 4th of a practice start date. Ben Nelson, the Section 4 executive, sent me a quick email saying he expects that the other leagues are going to vote soon too. So what's your sense of how Section 4 has been responding to the winter sports? Because I think that will be a really good indicator of where Section 3 will probably wind up going to.
If I had to guess today, if I was a betting man on the other leagues in Section 4, the MAC, the Tri-Valley, the Delaware League, I would say that they will probably follow suit in their when they do vote, that they would postpone a little bit longer. In the last couple of days, when I've stopped into the Section 4 office, it's right around the corner from where I work. At the station, they have just said continuing to wait. And I think one of the biggest things that they said was, we don't want to come out with a decision and have to backtrack. So I think they're trying to really wait this out as long as they can. In terms of the leagues, I don't know, because the smaller schools generally seem to follow what the bigger schools are doing. But I also know that the smaller schools, at least in this case, have been more of the ones that are willing to fight a little bit more on, hey, maybe we should try to do something. And I don't know if that's going to take place at these meetings or not. I know that there are some schools and some superintendents who have been very, very vocal about wanting to try to get something together, but it didn't work in the fall. I don't know if it's going to work now. I don't know if they're just going to get overruled again. So my sense is that the smaller school leagues that I cover here in Section 4 will follow the STAC and the IAC, and that we could be in the same boat of either waiting or a complete postponement, and again, staying in a holding pattern for the foreseeable future.
The Ivy League in college just canceled all winter sports seasons, and they were one of, if not the first college or anyone to cancel the fall sports seasons entirely. So I hear on the college front here, not to totally change gears, but on the college front here, there's a lot of like the conference kind of schedule. They wanted like the Empire 8 for Utica College. They want to play in the conference. We just heard Syracuse basketball, of course, the Division I school, came out with their schedule. Colgate in Hamilton has come out with their women's and men's basketball schedule. So they plan to play. Of course, the big thing is the resources, being able to do testing and quarantining and all of that along the way, which is maybe influences the Ivy League, but that could be a predictor of what happens with the SUNYAC, which includes SUNY Oneonta, or we have HCCC up here and Mohawk Valley and Utica College, the smaller D3/NJCAA schools. So But on the high school front, I think you bring up a good point about being smaller schools, because I noticed, actually, just noticing this really now in a way, there's kind of like a sweet spot of like how big your school has to be based on classification for it to actually participate. I noticed the very small schools, again, Old Forge, but that's another example of being far away. But Cooperstown, Class C school, the Class D school, we only had Poland play, both their programs played. But Remsen, Oriskany was playing, but the Remsens, smaller schools, these DC schools did not play, and we know that that was a big influence in your area because Section 4 also has Binghamton, bigger school, but that's farther away. Here, but meanwhile, Rome Free Academy, AA school, was playing, but Proctor High School judged that while the smaller schools are judging that they don't have enough resources to make this happen, or even enough people in some cases to play, the biggest school, Proctor High School in Utica, AA, was saying we're just too big and there's too many people around each other at all times, and we're going fully remote and we're doing all this, so how can we possibly participate? So it's like a sweet spot in there. But I think obviously the biggest challenge for winter sports is that we have to be inside, right? And it's an optimal thing to say that you have to wear the masks, and that they will, but like we saw from fall sports, the participants really weren't. And being inside where the air can't really flow in -4-degree temperatures in the winter, I think that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I think that's a really tough call. I just can't see schools, at least down here, from talking to them, I can't see them approving it. I think a lot of schools seem to be waiting, from talking to different ADs and superintendents. Everyone seems to be kind of thinking that there's this looming shutdown coming. We keep hearing a lot of things, and this is all hearsay. But hey, what's going to happen after Thanksgiving? Do we wait to make a decision after Thanksgiving? Is there going to be some sort of a spike after Thanksgiving?
The spike's happening now.
Yeah. So I think with this recent couple of weeks here of the way things are going, I think it's made it hard, plus indoors, and there's just a lot of things stacked against you in the deck. And the small schools, I think, are trying to wait it out, but it seems very similar, at least down here, as it was in the fall, that we can wait all we want. I don't know if it's going to change anything, but I applaud them for looking at all the options and trying to do something. I know there's some schools here that have done the open gyms. They're doing speed and agility type of things, and they've figured it out inside even how to be distanced and set up different stations and still be able to get a workout in. Is that going to be the same in the wintertime? I don't know. But at least they're trying to figure it out now, so that if we don't have games, I think the biggest thing I keep hearing from PE teachers and coaches and athletic directors is we have to find a way to at least keep kids active, keep them staying in shape, so that we're not just completely, in front of your computer all day. Finding some way to get out and get active, even if that isn't just something at the school. I think a lot of coaches that I've talked to have been really good about, hey, just even if you can get out with your family and go for a walk or play a game or whatever, they've really been trying hard to do things that are appropriate and find ways for kids to still remain active. But in terms of games down here, I just don't know, unfortunately.
I wonder whether there's more of an emphasis that will come up about playing not interscholastically, but intrascholastically, meaning like just the school itself. Because obviously these students are having gym class together. And one of the rules that I've heard a lot of coaches and athletic directors bring up as a challenge for what's about to come up is that the New York State Health Department guidance right now still says wear a mask at all times in gym and stay at least 12 feet apart, not the 6 like normal, it's 12 feet in gym, right. Physical education classes. So we spoke with Crystal Bass, the Proctor High School girls basketball coach, actually over the summer, and kind of did hey, winter sports, it might be getting a little forgotten here, but what should we know at the moment? And even a few months ago now, she was mentioning that how can you have the 12-foot rule and then say, okay, you're allowed to guard players in a varsity basketball game.
Right.
I will say, I know someone else we had on the cross section early on was Matt Hazard, and he tweeted out another theory of what might happen or question the other day, which is always great. Shout out to him. One of the things he asked was like, if sharing the ball in basketball is an issue, can't we just wipe it down or something? But I will say one of the biggest concerns going into the fall sports season with soccer was what about the ball and touching the ball? Or he was saying for volleyball, maybe you could wear gloves, because volleyball is listed as a high-risk sport. And I will say, if precedent speaks for itself in any way here, in soccer, they've been touching the ball, throwing it in, and there's been, they have ball people on the sidelines, usually younger kids step in for that role, and they've been tossing the ball. So that doesn't seem to have been any kind of issue in fall sports. So I don't see why that would specifically be the only reason, like that is the reason we're not doing volleyball or basketball. But I think there are other concerns, and the weather here is not necessarily something in our favor. So as much as I want to see them play, from what I'm hearing, to put it in, I'll quote a third, look at me, I'm on a roll. Third person we've had on the cross section, I ran into Whitesboro baseball head coach Tom Maggiolino, and he, after soccer games, his team would come on, and they've been practicing baseball and on the turf, throwing and stuff, racing out. I mean, he was like 10 yards apart and everything. And he was saying that, I said, hey, this looks fun. He goes, yeah, hey, Dave, what's up? He goes, we're just trying to break off some of the rust, and keep it going because he said, in the spring season, they want to get back into it. They've missed the whole time. And he goes, baseball is like, throwing a pitch is hard to build up that skill again. But to put it in his words, he said, we're doing this as long as we can now with the weather being okay. But he goes, I don't think we're going to see anything indoors anytime soon.
Yeah. No, totally makes sense. And I'm totally hearing the same thing down here, unfortunately.
And it's nothing that, a lot of people are saying, get those activities, like you said, let's get them something to do. And there are I hear a lot of perspectives that are being made, which are also valid, saying, they're in their rooms all day, or let's get them to do something. They have to be able to play, or, all of that. I don't think it's from the state though. And like you said, a lot of people are frustrated, I hear, with the waiting of like they said for the fall football season, we had a lot of coaches who were vocally upset. They said they were, and the emotion in their voice showed they were, that there wasn't a decision made. They were saying they would have rathered Governor Cuomo and the New York State Health Department and Rob Zayas and whoever just say in like July, we're not playing. And
right.
But from the administrator side, the reason they're waiting so long to try and give that hope is not to give a sense of false hope and then kick the can, as some people were describing. But it appears that they really are just trying to see what happens. And I mean, like we said, if things are changing on an hourly basis, what maybe in 2 weeks it does all of a sudden change. Who knows? But
right.
They're just waiting it out. And so it does appear we're in that, quote, holding pattern, again, as frustrating as it might be.
Yeah, I think, down here, we're just, again, waiting, seeing what happens. And at the same time, just trying to enjoy the good things. And I've talked to a lot of coaches and athletes and ADs that have said, hey, I've gotten to go home a lot, see my family, spend time that I usually don't because I'm on the road for games. So I think there's been a little bit of a silver lining there. I know it's been that way for me. Been able to come home, spend more time at home, get things done at home. So it's been an interesting shift. It's given me a lot of time to think about different things, try to get creative. So it definitely hasn't all been bad.
No, there's been learning experiences. We're all changed because of this. And I think not only us from a media perspective, and, we've also discussed that about how we've had to change and think about things. And I mean, even just deal with knowing that you have to check with every school about their own policies and being aware of those kind of things, which we might have taken for granted in the past. It's just on schedule, Galaxy. We could just go. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
But I think I noticed a sense of extra maturity from the student athletes that I had a chance to interact with. And it was great to be back in the community and talk with some of the people. I also have people in the community here who are very helpful to me, where they're like my steadfast, like, beat reporters, basically. They'll be like, I have one person for Westmoreland, one person for Sequoia, and they're like, I love being the reporter. I'll text you the score all the time. And I'm like, they are an extra source of validation that 3-0 was actually the final score. And, but it was good to see all these people and interact with them. But I think I noticed an extra sense of maturity from all the players, all the student athletes, because the seniors especially are grateful to have gotten a chance to play. And if anything, there's this, it gets repetitive at some point, but it just shows how prevalent it is that they really have it's been a message in gratitude that every day could be your last. And for some people it was, like Camden, their school went remote and that was it. They were going to participate in the TVL tournament, no longer. Because they said they go remote, they're going to suspend athletics. And that
right.
November 30th is after the season ended, when they'll be back. So the message of gratitude and just understanding that lesson of take things one day at a time and being able to think and being able to have, it's hard to describe, but that sense of maturity was noticeable in the student athletes of just, they were there, they were putting their all in, they were taking it seriously, the precautions, even if the masks came down a little bit during games, they were taking it seriously because they knew that was the way to, if this is what you have to do to accomplish something, and that's a lesson in itself. If you want to keep the season going, we're going to have to do this. And sometimes it might be adversity, which all of this is, or an obstacle. So another lesson in there. But it's just been very noticeable for student athletes of all ages, especially the seniors, who I guess are the most mature of all of them because they're the oldest there. But it's been interesting to see that play out. And now we're back to seeing whether they'll get the chance coming up to participate in winter sports. But if not, I'll be contacting every school's rifle team. I'm ready to cover rifle. I'm really interested in how swimming and diving is not a high-risk sport because they're all in the water at the same time and it's inside. But apparently it's moderate risk, and so it's good to go. But yeah, it's going to be
whatever we get down here, bowling, swimming and diving. If we get any of those things, we don't have many local rifle teams anymore, but whatever happens down here, I will be there. I was at a bowling alley last week and they were like, hey, can't wait to see you all the time coming up.
All the time. Yeah. I mean, I've never covered rifle before. I actually honestly have to look up a little bit more about what the rules would be and where they play and all that. I don't know how much we'd practically be covering it, but listen, if something's happening, we'll get the stories on it. Which leads me actually to another thought, which is what do you think like the top 3 stories are, the top 3 questions you have as a reporter over these next 4 weeks? Let's give it. That's 4 weeks from today is when the Section 3 fall winter sport practices are allowed to begin at the moment, technically. So what are the biggest things in the next 4 weeks? 3 questions or 3 stories that you're looking to try and get answered.
Let me plug my phone in and then I'll tell you.
Always good. In the while you're doing that, I will let you know that technology has not been my best friend recently. I was at the very first game of the season that I went to. It was Westmoreland girls soccer on the first day of games. I believe it was like October 5th. And I take out my phone to tweet something, and I'm like, oh, it's going really slow. Let me restart my phone. And so I restart my phone, which usually works. But this time it decided that my phone would be permanently disabled, and I lose not only all of like the information that's on there, but I thought I was backing everything up, and it should have been because I had it set up to do that. But no, I lost all my contacts. I lost everything. So that
was so weird when you text me and you're like, or whatever, you message me. I need your number.
Who's this? What? Yeah. I was like, I'm sorry, who is this? No, this is Nate. Do you know? Yeah. No, wait, who? Nate who? But yeah, that was, oh man. Always back up everything. The lesson I learned, I thought I was backing it up, but now I'm going to do it twice as much and even write it down by hand in this technology because Oh man, that was fun. It's proving, LinkedIn has like all the first connections, second connections, third connections.
Yes. Yep.
It's really proving how connected I am to everyone. Because as I remember who I'm trying to get in touch with, I'm like, okay, if I need to get in touch with this person, I have no other way to do it. How do I do it? Who do I have to ask? And it's like proving
Oh yeah.
I have to go through those routes. But anyway, what are your big stories? I've procrastinated for you.
I think my questions would be, number one, how they will classify the high risk stuff. What is going to change that so that those sports will be doable again? I think that's, we've kind of looked through all the health guidelines and whatever, but what's that tipping point going to be to get us back to that point? And is there a way that New York State eventually will consider, if we're inside, what are the precautions that we would have to take to make inside sports possible? I think that's something that's on my mind a lot. And then I think something that's also been on my mind a lot is what will happen in the spring with things down here. Are they going to continue to try to do all this stuff in the spring, especially here where nobody has played? Are they going to be trying to do the 3-season thing and cramming it all in? And how are they going to make that happen on different fields with weather, etc.? And I also want to talk to a lot of schools about their record books. I know there's a lot of kids that, are going for different milestones and things like that. And if these kids don't get a chance to play, how are they going to handle some of that? Is there just going to be a little asterisk next to some names that said they didn't get to play that season? And how will each school handle it? I think those are some things that I've thought a lot about. There's a lot of kids I know that are going to be close to 1,000 points, or even one girl who's close to 2,000, and just how they're all going to handle that. So that's a lot of my questions, is what will the winter and the spring look like when we get there?
Yeah, long-term thinking. It will be interesting to see the second fall season, because Section 4, just because they didn't play now, doesn't mean they're not going to play soccer and
Right.
field hockey and football, which is, that football was moved to the second one entirely.
Right.
But soccer could have been either, and Section 4 chose all of them to be postponed. So these seasons can happen still, which would be incredible to see. I've been hearing a lot of positive thoughts about the outdoor sports, right? So the weather is going to be the big determining factor. So I guess if we're talking about that far in advance, it will be what is the weather going to be? I might have to check with my meteorologist and pull out an almanac or something and look ahead. But that far down the road, I think that's the biggest thing. Or else I really do hear a lot of positivity that, and we saw it. Successful fall season. The one school per week is way too many per week still. No one wants anyone to be getting the coronavirus. But it was successful. Everyone appears, I haven't heard anything terrible happening as far as, the sports were concerned. They were able to happen, and the season was completed. And the schools took the precautions necessary when needed to address situations they dealt with. So when it comes to the fall 2 or the spring season, I think we have a better understanding now than we did last spring to understand how this was going to have to happen, which is why we saw cases go up so much. I think that before winter sports, one of my biggest things I'm curious about, and again, this is news about sports. Usually sports is the news. We're covering the games, what do the players say, but this is the news about sports right now, and it includes economics and health and all that other areas. Right now, it's going to be what happens with the cases. Like I said, in Oneida County, we're seeing over 100 cases a day here for the past few days. And again, people had Halloween parties. There was apparently a very big wedding here with no social distancing. And, I guess I'm also curious, how much is that coming from the school districts? Or is it coming from restaurants and bars and weddings and parties? Are the schools, how well have they been handling it? And what does that mean for their ability to have the athletics? So the coronavirus cases might sound obvious, but with the wave, second wave, third wave, whatever they want to call it, the cases are increasing at the moment. And what does that mean for being indoors, plus flu season? The other thing is just, like you said, what is that tipping point? I'm curious to see how the different sections approach things differently, because Section 4 clearly took things differently. Section 3 took things differently, even schools within Section 3. So what would that take? And also just, what are the alternatives? If we do have bowling, what precautions need to be taken to have bowling and spread out by lanes? And I mean, that would be pretty cool to cover bowling. I hope everyone gets a chance to participate in something. Also, I'm looking forward to seeing whether we have any 4-sport athletes this year, because some soccer players are saying they'll play football for the first time ever if they get the opportunity, right? And just seeing what are the alternatives if there are no winter sports traditionally. What are the alternatives? Like we were talking about, what ways are there to have some kind of competition or athletic activity in the meantime? Because I think everyone's goal is to keep everyone safe. I think everyone understands that. Some people might agree or disagree on the way to be safe or how precautious you need to be. But at the end of the day, again, from the beginning, the success standard was set by the coaches, athletic directors, administrators at everyone's healthy at the end. And we got there for fall. How are we going to get there for the future seasons? Or how are they going to get there? I don't make the decisions. I just cover them.
Yeah, exactly. I still am in the same boat of I don't envy the people that have to make these decisions. I sit back and whatever that I'm allowed to do, I will go do. That's for sure. And I just hope every day that they find a way to give kids as many options as possible. I will be glad to go to a bowling alley every night of the week if that's what it takes. So,
yeah. But again, an indoor sport, so it's just hoping for the best for the student athletes and everyone's health. But it's been a pleasure to cover the Section 3 fall sports season, and it will continue to be a pleasure to cover whatever is coming next as far as the decisions are being made.